Today's lesson is going to be about solving equations, including variables on both sides and including parentheses. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at number one. Number one tells us 10 times the group of 8 tenths plus 2 tenths c equals 4c. What we want to do, we always want to just start off by separating our equations when we're solving equations. We're going to separate it. We have a left side and a right side. Now, because we have these parentheses here, we're going to have to distribute or use our distributive property. And when we distribute, we're essentially multiplying the number on the outside of the parentheses times each term on the inside of the parentheses. And that's what you see me doing right here. So we have 10 times 8 tenths plus 10 times 2 tenths c equals 4c. When we multiply these, that's going to give us, we can do 10 times 8, which is 80. And since there's only one number behind the decimal, that's going to leave us with 8.0. And we can do the same for the 10 times 2 tenths. 10 times 2 is 20. There's one number after the decimal, so that it really is just 2c. And if it helps, you can rewrite it. So we can just write 8 plus 2c equals 4c. After that, we should be showing that we're going to go ahead and subtract both sides. Subtract 2c from both sides. That's going to leave us with 8 equals 2c. And then we're going to divide both sides. We're going to divide both sides by 2. And that's going to give us a final answer of c is equal to 4. Another way that we can solve number one, all right, is instead of distributing the 10 on the left side, we can go ahead and start off by dividing both sides by the 10, because really this 10 here is a factor. That's one of the factors. So if we don't want to distribute, you could essentially show that you're dividing both sides by 10. So let's go ahead and rewrite this. 10 times 0 and 8 tenths plus 0 and 2 tenths c equals 4c. And now I'm going to actually show that I'm dividing both sides by 10. Okay, what that does on the left side, these 10s cancel out. So I'm just going to be left with what's in the parentheses. 0 and 8 tenths plus 0 and 2 tenths c equals. Now, when I do 4 divided by 10, that's 4 tenths. I can just write that as the decimal, 0 and 4 tenths c. Now I can go ahead and just continue with my regular rules of solving equations. What you do to one side, you do to the other. So here I'm going to subtract 0 and 2 tenths c from both sides. 0 and 2 tenths c from both sides. That's going to leave me with 0 and 8 tenths equals 0 and 2 tenths c. All right. And the last step is obviously to go ahead and divide both sides by 0 and 2 tenths. And when we do that, that will leave us with 4 is equal to c. Now, one more way to look at solving number one. Maybe you're a fraction. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to work it out for my fraction people that who prefer to see the numbers as fractions. Okay? So instead of 8 tenths and 2 tenths, we're going to convert both of those to fractions. So 8 tenths, let's go ahead and convert to fractions. Convert to fractions. So 0 and 8 tenths equals 8 divided by 10, but we know both of those can be divided by 2, which is really going to leave us with 4/5. So 0 and 8 tenths, we can change that to 4/5. Now, what about the 0 and 2 tenths? Well, we can write that as 2 tenths once again, we know both of these can be divided by 2. So really, that's going to equal 1/5. So 0 and 2/10 is really 1/5 as a fraction. So let's go ahead and rewrite our equation. 10 times the group of 4/5 plus 1/5 c equals 4c. Now, let's go ahead and use our distributive property. When we do that, I'm going to do 10 times 4/5 and 10 times 1/5 c. When we multiply, that's going to leave me with 40 divided by 5 plus 10 divided by 5c equals 4c. When we simplify that, 40 divided by 5 is 8. 10 divided by 5 is 2, so that's 2c, and then we still have 4c. And now we can go ahead and finish going through our rules for solving equations. What you do to one side, you do to the other. And we always want to get our variables together. So that's why I went ahead and subtracted 2c from both sides. That's going to result in 8 equals 2c. And the last step is to rewrite and show that we're going to divide both sides by 2. That will leave us with 4 is equal to c. So now we've done number 1 a total of 3 different ways. This last way included converting those decimals to fractions. We're going to go ahead and keep it moving. Number 2. So let's go ahead and rewrite it. We have 7 plus 4.5, or 4 5/10 w, equals 10 minus 1 5/10 w. Let's divide our equation into 2 sides. We have a left side and a right side. Okay. And what we want to do first is, like I said, we want to get our variables on the same side. So what I like to do, I like to always move the smaller variable term to the larger side. So the smaller variable term here is the negative 1 5/10 w. So we're going to add that. Okay, and that's when we add, we're using our inverse operation. Because it was a negative, we want to do the inverse of a negative, or the opposite of a negative, which is a positive, or to add. Okay, so these essentially are gone, those 1.5s, and now we bring down everything else. 7 plus 4.5 and 1.5 makes 6w equals 10. Now we can combine our constants. That means we need to subtract 7 from both sides. Those 7s disappear, and now we're left with 6w equals 3. And the last thing we're going to show is that we're dividing both sides by 6. Okay, which tells us that w is going to equal 1/2. And there is number 2. Number 3. Number 3 says 9x minus 1/4 equals 8x minus 9/4. So once again, we start off by rewriting our equation, and then we want to separate it into 2 sides. We have a left side and a right side. So let's go ahead and separate it. And now, very first thing we want to do is group our variables together. So we have a positive 9x and we have a positive 8x. I want to move the smaller one, so I'm going to subtract 8x from both sides. That's going to leave me with 1x minus 1/4 equals negative 9/4. Okay, and just to make sure that we know, there's that negative 9/4, so you bring that down. Okay, right there. Now we want to get our constants together. So what I want to show is that I'm adding 1/4 to both sides. That's going to leave me with 1x equals negative. Since both of the fractions have the same denominator, we're going to keep that the same, and we're going to combine the numerators. That's a negative 9 and a positive 1. When you combine those, that makes negative 8. And when we simplify this, that simplifies to x equals, well, negative 8 divided by positive 4 is going to give us a negative 2. Number 4. So with number 4, it says 3c minus 16 equals 0.4 times the group of 10 minus 5c. All right, first things first, I want to start off by rewriting it. So 3c minus 16 equals 0.4 times the group of 10 and negative 5c. Now, second, we want to divide our equation to two sides. We have a left side and a right side. On the left side, we can't do anything yet, so we can just bring everything down. That's 3c minus 16 on the left side. On the right side, we're going to have to distribute that 4/10 and multiply it times 10 and multiply it times 4c. So let's go ahead and write that out. We're going to have 4/10 times positive 10 plus 4/10 times negative 5c. All right, let's go ahead and simplify that. So on the next line, we'll have 3c minus 16 equals 4/10 times 10 is just going to leave us with 4. 4/10 times negative 5, that's going to leave us with negative 2c. And for those who need to see this one worked out, to see how we got that, we want to do it without a calculator. This is what I would write out. 4/10 times 5 over 1. Excuse me, that's a negative 5 over 1. That's going to give you negative 20 divided by 10, which equals negative 2. Okay? Now getting back to our problem. Now that we have just variables and just constants, now we want to go ahead and combine our variables, get those on the same side. And I'm going to move the 2c by adding it to both sides. And the reason I'm moving the 2c is because it's the smaller one, the smaller variable term. So that's going to leave me with 1c minus 16 equals 4. And now, since I have negative 16 on the left, I want to move that negative 16 to the right side. I'm going to add 16 to both sides. And that's going to leave me with 1c equals, oh, excuse me. And this shouldn't be 1c. I apologize about that. That should really be 5c. Moving too fast there. So that's 5c equals 20. All right. And now, our last step, we're going to rewrite it and show that we're going to divide both sides by 5. And once we do that, our final answer is going to be C is equal to positive 4. That's one number 5. We have 4n plus 17 and 5/10 equals 12 and 5/10 plus 9n. So we first want to start by rewriting our problem and then dividing it into two sides. And now we have our left side and our right side. And since we don't have anything to distribute, we want to go ahead and get our always start by moving your variables first. My suggestion is always to move the smaller variable to the bigger variable. The smaller variable is 4n. I want to move it over here with this positive 9n. And since the 4n is positive, in order to move it, I have to subtract it or add negative 4n to both sides. So now that I've shown that I'm doing that, the 4n's cancel out. So on the left side, I'm just left with 17 and 5/10. And on the right side, we're going to have 12 and 5/10 plus 5n. Now we can go ahead and get our constants together and get them combined. And then in order to do that, I'm going to have to subtract 12 and 5/10 from both sides. Once I do that, the result of that will be 5 is equal to 5n. Next, we're going to rewrite that and show that we're dividing both sides by 5. And 5 divided by 5 is 1. So n is equal to 1. All right, and that will conclude today's lesson on solving equations with variables on both sides and with parentheses.